Okay, today we'll talk about Alejandro Aravena, the architect from Chile who received the Pritzker Prize, I think, in 2016. Here are some pictures with him. Everybody probably knows him because he was highly publicized based on his earning the Pritzker Prize and also becoming the curator of the Venice Biennial in 2016. Here he receives the Pritzker Prize from a member of the Pritzker family. Here he is again with his Elemental is the name of his architectural practice, and there are drawings done manually by Alejandro. And he studied at this university, the Catholic University of Chile. And let's read a little bit about him. Alejandro Gaston Aravena Mori, born on the 22nd of June, 1967, is a Chilean architect and executive director of the firm Elemental SA. He won the Pritzker Architecture Prize in 2016, and also he was the director and curator of the architecture section of the 2016 Venice Biennial. Some drawings by Aravena. Sorry about the resolution, I mean the size of this, but that's how I found them. He actually had another rocky start. I understood that after he finished his studies, either he couldn't find work or something like this, and he opened a bar, and you know, he struggled at the beginning. Who would have thought that he would win the Pritzker Prize and then he would be the curator of such an important architectural event as the Venice Biennial? So anything can happen if you follow your path and you have a lot of passion and you work hard. Chances are that something good would happen. I go a little bit quickly because we'll have to talk about other architects today, and I want to be able to talk about all of them. So we'll continue with Alejandro Aravena. He is very fond also of matter, of materials, of construction materials, as you can see here. He actually employed this method of, having interventions, manual interventions on the bricks, and he employed them as you see them here. A House for a Sculptor is an early work by Aravena. I like the fact that it doesn't have finishes. The brick is left as brick, exposed, and concrete is left as concrete, exposed as well. Why spend unnecessarily on finishes, you know, on plaster or I don't know what? It's not necessary. This is more sincere, it's more honest. You see how the building came into being. Another house. A more privileged one in a beautiful setting. I think there is also a picture with a horse in front of the house. I like the fact that he doesn't use, at least in this house, you know, white walls and so on. There is the, you know, the tectonics, the tactility of stone, of wood, and you know, it is an architecture that connects with the surroundings, with nature. So the distance between nature and culture is not vast, although the geometry is explicitly denoting the work of man, of the human being. A house by Alejandro Aravena in Chile. And we'll have the occasion to compare his work with the work of Smiljan Radic, about whom I will also talk today. I personally regret that the richness of the materials outside are not to be found inside. Inside, you know, with the exception of the floors, uh, it's a different kind of architecture somehow, too sleek. But maybe that's what the clients desired. I don't know. The site plan. What is interesting is that the living room is upstairs. Usually the living room is on the first floor, but here is on the second floor, together with the kitchen and the master bedroom and the dining space. And the other bedrooms are at a lower level, as you can see them here. And the garage for 3 cars. The Siamese Towers, a workshop building at the School of Architecture and faculty buildings at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile, where he studied. The university asked them, well, Aravena, to question the type of architecture required for teaching now that everything depends on digital technology. Should architecture change now that we have computers? Does the notion of room, be it for work or to attend a class, still make sense? The answer of the architect was, of course, yes and no. So these are the Siamese towers. Yes, because the paradigm for working spaces has been reversed. If until now a good room was the one that had a good natural light, library, classroom, etc., now that we work on screens, a good space is the one that has achieved a good half light to avoid uncomfortable reflections. This fact led us, the architects, to explore a relatively hermetic volume with very few very controlled perforations towards the outside. But on the other hand, we were not that optimistic regarding computers and their influence in education or the transmission of knowledge. In the end, nothing will defeat a good conversation of two people, two persons, be it between a professor and a student or between students, under a good shadow, drinking a nice cup of coffee or having a casual conversation in a corridor. In a way, formal education is taken care by building codes, light, acoustics, ventilation, etc., but nobody takes care of informal education. And there we saw a design opportunity. So instead of moving forward, thinking about the next step in education, we thought we had to move back as much as possible to more archaic and primitive ways of being. I like this very much because I think indeed the so-called informal education is neglected, and we value more what is called the building codes and so on. But the spontaneity, the naturalness, the organic quality of even an ad hoc encounter on a corridor or in a park, on a bench, in the courtyard, with another student or with a professor, that kind of interaction, I think, is very, very beneficial to education. And it is an informal education. The Cami Towers by Alejandro Aravena, and Elemental, his architecture office. You know, this kind of education where you interact with a colleague, for example, you know, a casual encounter could benefit the transmission of education a lot. And here there is a doubleness or a two-ness also in terms of the technology he employed. On one hand, a sophisticated technology, on the other hand, a very archaic one, like you see this here. You know, this kind of arte povera aesthetics would be probably discouraged by most, you know, university campuses. But I think it's very refreshing to see the absence of makeup, which the so-called finishes promote. And you see a double facade. So there is the mask of the second facade, and not only the acceptance, but the promotion of a half light or half lit spaces. Exactly because the computer is not very comfortable, or the use of the computer where you have plenty of light. Working with computers requires, you know, reduced quantity and quality of light. But unfortunately, we still think in terms of as if the computers didn't exist, but they add a new dimension to the handling of the interior space of a room, and not to speak about the exterior, because if we are to use laptops, for example, outside of the building, what do? You need a lot of shade. This is a college, another building, another complex of buildings by Alejandro Aravena and his firm Elemental. US Faculty of Mathematics in Santiago de Chile, the capital of Santiago of Chile. The Mount Johnson Residential Hall of St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, in the United States. Here are some buildings built there. You wonder what is this piece, leaning against the blank wall of this narrow elevation. Maybe they wanted to suggest the process of becoming. And this is important for a building. You know, uh, the building is finalized, but it's important to also remember process. And and process it is, as you can see, the typical student environment. A lot of disorder, a lot of agitation. Maybe the exams were in full swing, and so was the student. Um, yeah, it's life. From the outside, the building appears to be, undisturbed by any kind of disorder, very solid, rigid even. But inside is this. So this is in the United States, in Texas. It is so important, the surface of our buildings. Some surfaces indeed invite to being caressed, just as we see in this picture. Now, if it was just a white blank wall, I don't think that under common conditions would invite to being caressed. But this kind of texture inspires, and imagination is stirred up by a surface which has character, which has personality. Inside is something different, as you can see. Different materials. The ambiance is more artificial, but is compensated the artificiality with a redness of red. Constitution Cultural Center. This is also an interesting building. There is one aspect that I will mention a little bit later, which I do not quite understand. You see these spikes here, horizontal spikes. I wonder why they were placed here. I hope not because to make people unable to lean against these vertical pieces, because I find this rather aggressive. But anyway, Chile, Alejandro Aravena, the cultural center. Another building in Santiago, an innovation center. Here we see the elemental qualities of his architecture. the lack of, let's say, conventional windows creates a building which is monumental and is not quite easy to understand its scale. I mean, yes, we have the human silhouettes. That's the only indication that makes us, approximate the size of the building. But I like the fact that it doesn't have, typical windows, either horizontal or vertical, but rather these large openings into this massive bulk of construction. They have terrible earthquakes in Chile, and yet look what cantilever parts they are able to build. So maybe we should think about this. Chile has much more deadly earthquakes than Romania, and yet they build more adventurously. What exactly is happening in this room, which is cantilevered, I don't know. But you can see there are no windows. Villa Verde in Constitucion, that's the city. Here he tried to experiment with maybe an interesting idea, but I don't think it worked very well. The idea was to give a house only half cooked, so to speak, to the inhabitants, leaving room for another half to be developed in time. Uh, I don't know. I mean, there is apparently a certain degree of freedom here because each apartment, each house has this additional space which could be developed at freedom with freedom later on. But uh, the effects are not truly in the name of an assumed increase in freedom. Essentially, his architecture at the level of, I guess these are social housing. Um, they there is a certain rigidity, in my opinion. This regularity, this equidistance, the sequence is almost militaristic, and yeah, here we see some interventions. So we could say that these parts, which were designed by him, would represent the stable elements of the composition, and then we have the unstable ones, which allow for ad hoc I'm sorry, ad hoc interventions by the owners of the specific house. It's conceptually is rather clear, and it seems to make sense. But in reality, I'm not sure if in essence, is some kind of a meeting between order and disorder. But the result, from what I saw, doesn't seem to be very convincing. It's a little bit mechanical, this process. That's what I try to say. And you'll see a view from above, from the air, a vol d'oiseau, where this kind of urbanism is rather simplistic and additive and certainly not organic. But the idea is generous. You know, you just build half of the house. It could function like this, or it could develop, it could double its usable space based on the means and the desires of the owners of the house. These are modest houses, social housing, actually. You see here, is it really a human or humane environment? I find it rather oppressive with its rhythmical regularity, and I'm not against, you know, social equality, and quite the opposite. I am all for it, but I think some variation would be positive. And here I don't see much variation. Is this, you know, egalitarian architectural structure, which is could be you know oppressive in its obsessional mode. This is what I feel. The House of Writing in Switzerland, well, he only built a fragment of this House of Writing where, you know, was meant for meeting, meetings between writers in Switzerland. And he built, he actually didn't build this. I don't know who built this roofing and with the poles supporting the roof. He built just one building here. So let's read. Dan Coma isn't the only big name to build for the Jan Michalski Foundation. Pritzker Prize winner Alejandro Aravena was responsible for the elemental treehouse, a glass cube that floats atop a hanging concrete slab. Rather than being a workspace for residents, the elemental treehouse is a cabin where writers and foundation staff can cook and share meals. Granite floors, a common kitchen, dining table, and the living room area lend the cabin a more communal feel. This is the building. I find the interior rather depressing in its bourgeois sweetness. A school in Chile, 2015. I like to hope that in the meantime, you know, some vegetation showed up there, because right now the absence of vegetation make it rather questionable. Anyway, they do, now I see some vegetation here, so I guess it's some progress. The value of what's not built, the Venice Biennial 2018. And I also think that we should consider the value of what is not built. I like very much his participation in this Venice Biennial in 2018 with the simplest means. He had a very pleasing, aesthetically pleasing participation in the name of the country, the Chile, with just sheets of paper folded in half and supported by a thin wire, you know, thread, or you see it here. With I like it very much because it shows that with the simplest means, you can create something very, very pleasing aesthetically and very efficient. The only expensive thing here were these little, tablets where digital material was to be seen. Otherwise, everything was probably almost free. I mean, it didn't cost anything. Some pieces of paper where he drew and wrote with his own hand, and this was his participation at the Venice Biennial in 2018. If you make abstraction of the tablets, probably the cost of his contribution to the Venice Biennial was less than $100. Remarkable. And I think this is truly a way to move forward in terms of sustainability, to try to do as much as possible with the least expenditure. So Elementor sometimes acts as strategic, inventive thinker and sometimes as active maker of finished buildings. The work ranges from several incremental open system housing projects to the sculptural clear form of the Innovation Center for the Angelini Group. In our manifesto, we suggested that free space encourages, that was the theme of that Venice Biennial in 2018, encourages new ways of seeing the world, inventing solutions where architecture provides for the well-being and dignity for each citizen on this fragile earth. Alejandro Aravena of Elemental continually campaigns for this cause, highlighting the need for architecture to deal with the enormous problem of providing open systems rather than finished objects so as to house with dignity the growing population of the world and our cities. I would agree with what is written here. I'm not so sure about the usage of the word systems, but it seems we cannot avoid it. It's a word, it's a magical word that we still believe a lot in systems. I'm not sure this is really the best world in which systems rule everything. I'm trying now to see, it's even difficult for me to explain because I cannot see the text at the top. The first line he proposed is the free space be used as a verb, a commandment for leaving unoccupied voids so as to capitalize on the spontaneous initiative of people to extend and build for themselves. His call to leave free space as public space reserve is laudable. He cites the proportion of private land to public space in developed countries as being 1:1, dropping to 1:10 in underdeveloped countries. His arguments are made through his own hand sketches and text as exhibited here in this biennial architecture in 2018. Big ideas which cut to the chase are expressed simply and clearly and cannot be ignored. Yeah, I was impressed myself by his contribution to that biennial, but he confused me in 2020, where I don't know if I have here his images of his contribution to the Venice Biennial in 2018. But this one in 2016, you see extremely simply some scotch tape, left and right, a wire here, and then folding a piece of paper in half and suspending it from the wire. Great, and done spontaneously. It's pleasing aesthetically and very, very inexpensively. It's a statement in itself, and it's known how expensive the Venice Biennial is and how much it costs to create the participation. Personally, I would have done it even without the tablets, to be truly extreme in the in the sense of spending almost nothing in order to create a a telling participation in the Venice Biennial. Now in 2020, 2021, things changed. Project info name, how will we live together, Chileans and Mapuche, I don't know if I pronounce well, building places to get to know each other, building places to parlive. Location, Arsenale, Venice, the 17th International Architecture Exhibition, architect Alejandro Aravena and his collaborators from Elemental, and this is what they did. And I was displeased actually because perhaps the ideas behind it are correct, but to transport, first to cut down so many trees and probably bring them to Venice from Chile is in contradiction with what he stated in the previous Venice Biennial. You know, a lot of expenditure, cutting down trees, majestic trees, you can see here, in order to make a monumental architectural statement. To me, this is not sustainable at all. So I think he contradicts himself here. If you truly care about sustainability, if you truly care about the climate change, if you truly care about nature, about the trees, you don't cut them down in order to ship them in a very expensive and demanding way from Chile to Venice. Now, it's true, I don't know if that's where the trees come from, but I think this is the case. But even if they came from Venice, it's still something I think we should abstain from doing. I think we can make statements, if we are to make statements, without cutting down so many trees. So I don't know what to think of him, really, how serious he is to save the world, as he would put it. Do we need another monument like this? And flagrantly, you know, going against nature. I would not have done it if I had the chance to say something. And I find this puzzling because the previous biennial showed that he can be very, very sensitive and with very simple means have his message come across. But here is something else. It's kind of an anti-ecology. You know, it's regressive. It's almost retrograde. You claim you care about the means that we have at our disposal. You care about the climate, the environment, and so on, and then you cut down so many trees. And I do think they came from Chile. Can you imagine to send from Chile to Venice all these cut down trees? The expenditures were enormous. So I have some question marks about Aravena. I confess. I didn't have questions regarding what he showed in 2016, but what he showed in this biennial actually saddened me. So that's about it about Aravena. Let's have a little let's talk a little bit